It started off as a joke one that was never meant to go anywhere. Inside, a noisy garage filled with the usual buzz of tools and chatter. A group of engineers had gathered around a broken engine that had been giving them trouble for days. They were trained, experienced, and confident, but none of their methods seemed to work. That's when a soft-spoken woman, who had come in only to pick up her brother, happened to glance over. One of the younger engineers, perhaps out of frustration or amusement, chuckled and said, "Hey, why don't you give it a try?" The others laughed, thinking it was just harmless teasing. She didn't say much, just walked over slowly, eyes focused on the engine, like she'd seen something they'd DN'd single quotes. No one expected her to even know what she was looking at or all. She wasn't wearing coveralls, didn't have grease on her hands, and definitely didn't look like a mechanic. But there was something about the quiet confidence in her expression that made the room fall still. She asked a few questions, simple ones, yet sharp. And then, without hesitation, she picked up a wrench. The mood shifted. Some smirked. Others crossed their arms. But as she leaned in, touched the engine, and adjusted a tiny part no one had paid attention to, the room went silent. What happened next left even the most seasoned engineer stunned and changed the way they looked at her forever. The woman's name was Sarah, and she wasn't just anyone. She grew up watching her father fix everything from old radios to broken down trucks in their tiny backyard workshop. He used to say, "Machines talk if you're quiet enough to listen." Those words had stuck with her, even as life took her away from tools and into a quieter routine. She worked at a nearby bookstore. Now nothing flashy, just a calm job that suited her quiet nature. But inside, that love for solving mechanical puzzles never really faded. Back in the garage, the engineers exchanged looks, unsure whether to stop her or just let the moment play out. The engine was part of a high-stakes project, a prototype that had stalled days before a critical presentation. They'd tried everything: recalibrations, software resets, component swaps. Nothing worked. Sarah, unaware of the pressure behind the project, simply followed what she felt made sense. Her hands moved with steady purpose, checking the airflow, valve tapping gently on the fuel line, adjusting a sensor with precision that didn't seem accidental. Behind her, the head engineer, Mark, narrowed his eyes. Something about the way she moved made him uneasy, not in a bad way, but like he was watching something he couldn't quite explain. One of the interns whispered, "How does she even know where that part goes?" But no one answered. The room had turned still again. A soft hum echoed from the engine as she made her final adjustment. And then she stepped back without a word. Everyone held their breath. The lead engineer's arms were still crossed, but his expression had shifted. He wasn't smirking anymore. Mark stepped forward slowly, eyeing the engine like it had just spoken a different language. One of the junior engineers walked around to check the system panel, then looked up and nodded. "The diagnostics are clearing. Completely." A low murmur swept across the room. Sarah stood off to the side, still calm, like she hadn't done anything unusual. But the tension in the garage grew even sharper. Mark didn't want to believe it. This woman who didn't have a badge, who no one had seen before, had just done what his entire team couldn't. He kept replaying her movements in his head, trying to figure out if it was luck or something more. Meanwhile, a few team members whispered quietly. One of them, Leo, was especially irritated. He had been working on the engine day and night, and now felt like a joke. He pulled Mark aside. "We can't just let her walk in here and show us up. This isn't just a machine anymore, as our reputation." At the same time, another subplot quietly unfolded. A manager from the parent company had been watching from the office window above. He didn't say a word, but his eyes followed Sarah closely. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Something about her confidence, something untrained, but instinctual, made him wonder if they had overlooked a talent that didn't fit inside resumes or degrees. Tension hung heavy in the garage. No one said it out loud, but it was clear. Sarah's unexpected success had disrupted the hierarchy. Mark, now visibly uneasy, paced near the engine, trying to mask his frustration. "Let's run a full diagnostic again," he barked, though everyone knew it had already been done twice. The engine was fine. But his pride wasn't. Across the room, Leo couldn't stop glaring. He kept whispering to another team member, and it was obvious they were planning something. Meanwhile, Sarah stood quietly, her hands loosely folded, eyes scanning the room. She wasn't smug or defensive, just observant. The manager upstairs was still watching, but now he was on a call. His tone was serious, and though no one could hear the words, it was clear this moment wasn't going unnoticed by higher-ups. Down on the floor, another junior engineer approached Sarah cautiously, curious rather than confrontational. "Did you know where to start?" he asked, genuinely interested. Sarah gave a soft smile and shrugged. "Sometimes machines speak. You just have to listen." Her words, so simple, added to the mystery. Mark overheard and scoffed under his breath. But it didn't matter, people were starting to doubt him. Then Leo raised his voice. "If she's that good, let's see what she does with the ignition alignment issue on Unit 4, he challenged loudly. Everyone turned to look. Unit 4 had been dead for weeks, completely frozen. It was a bold dare, one that could shift everything. Again, Sarah glanced at Unit 4, then back at Leo. His tone wasn't just challenging, it was mocking, almost daring her to fail in front of everyone. The room fell silent again, eyes shifting between her and the engine that had stumped even the most senior engineers. Without a word, she stepped toward it, her movements slow but steady. There was something in her gaze, focused, fearless, almost like she had been here before. Mark crossed his arms again, but now his confidence looked forced. He muttered to Leo, "Good, let her try. Maybe that'll shut this circus down." What none of them knew, however, was that Unit 4 wasn't just a technical headache. It had already cost the company a major contract delay, and touching it without clearance was strictly off-limits. But Sarah didn't ask for permission. She crouched beside the console, examining wires, listening to subtle clicks and vibrations that no one else seemed to notice. The junior engineer who had spoken to her earlier watched with growing curiosity. "She's not guessing," he whispered. "She's diagnosing." Upstairs, the manager's call had ended, but his phone was still recording. A second executive now stood beside him, eyes narrowing. "You didn't say she was the woman from the workshop audit in District 8, the executive said. The manager didn't respond. Down below, Sarah pulled a single wire, adjusted a calibration dial, and looked up. "Try it now," she said quietly. Leo hesitated, then pushed the ignition button. The machine let out a loud click. Everyone held their breath as the ignition light blinked, then turned solid green. The machine hissed, clicked again, then roared to life. A powerful hum echoed through the workshop, smoother than anyone had ever heard from Unit 4. People jumped back, startled. The same engine that had refused to start for over a month now purred like new. Leo's face turned pale, and Mark dropped his arms, stunned into silence. A few engineers clapped in disbelief. The junior tech looked at Sarah like he'd just seen a magician. Sarah didn't smile. She simply stood up and brushed her hands off, calm as ever. "Sometimes the problem isn't the part that's broken," she said softly. "It's the part everyone overlooks." The words landed like a punch. Mark tried to respond, but nothing came out. He looked at the engine, then at her, and 4. The first time there was no arrogance in his expression, only confusion. Upstairs, the second executive raised an eyebrow. "She solved it in under 3 minutes," he said. That's faster than the whole engineering team managed in 4 weeks. The manager nodded slowly, still processing. She's not just some repairwoman. She's the one who redesigned the compression models last year. She used to work in R&D till her team took credit for her work. Back on the floor, Sarah finally met Leo's eyes. But before anyone could say a word, the CEO walked into the room. No announcement, no warning. Just a quiet entrance, followed by 5 words that shocked everyone. "She's your new project lead." The room went completely silent after the CEO's words. Even Mark, who had mocked her just hours ago, didn't have anything to say. Sarah didn't gloat or even react much. She just nodded respectfully and looked at the engine one last time. Like it was an old friend she'd finally been allowed to visit again. The other engineers, once skeptical, now approached her with cautious curiosity, asking quiet questions about her fix and what they'd missed. She explained it all patiently, never once making anyone feel small. In the days that followed, Sarah's leadership began to reshape the team. Her approach was different, less about rigid rules, more about understanding the machines and the people who worked on them. She encouraged questions, welcomed mistakes, and focused on finding creative solutions instead of placing blame. Even Leo, who had been bitter about the bet, started showing up early to shadow her. Notebook in hand, the project they'd been stuck on for months finally moved forward fast.